When a nation believes it's safe, that's when it becomes most vulnerable. On October 4th, 2025, Ukraine executed one of its most calculated and far-reaching precision strikes of the war, deep inside Russian territory, say nearly 620 miles from the front line. The target, a $184 million Russian missile corvette anchored in what Moscow considered the safest waters in Europe, the White Sea Baltic Canal system near St. Petersburg. What followed was a demonstration of modern warfare that erased centuries of Russian military assumptions about safety, distance, and depth. At 4:31 a.m. local time, the calm waters of Lake Onega were broken by the blare of ship sirens. The 950-ton Russian warship Grad, a Buyan-M class missile carrier, had been anchored for maintenance. This lake, part of the 141-mile, 227-kilometer White Sea Baltic Canal, connects Russia's internal waterways to the Baltic via St. Petersburg. For the Russian Navy, it was a protected artery, well beyond the reach of enemy fire. But this morning, it became the site of one of the most humiliating incidents in Russian naval history. Just half an hour earlier, at around 3 a.m., the ship's captain had been resting in his cabin. There had been no alerts, no signs of danger. The Grad was positioned roughly 620 miles from the Ukrainian front lines, inside the Republic of Karelia near the Finnish border, essentially St. Petersburg's backyard. This was an area Russian officers regarded as untouchable. At the canal's control center in Petrozavodsk, operators were conducting routine traffic checks, adjusting lock schedules and water levels for the upcoming passage of a nuclear submarine convoy from the White Sea. To them, the night was uneventful. The only thing that mattered was keeping their coffee warm. The Grad carried 8 caliber cruise missiles, each capable of delivering nuclear or conventional warheads. But the ship's defense systems were inactive. Most of the crew were on shore leave, and the AK-630 close-in weapon systems were powered down. After being relocated from the Black Sea, the captain believed this harbor, hundreds of miles from combat, offered absolute safety. That assumption would prove fatal. Lake Onega, the canal's widest and slowest section, was also its weakest link. It was here, at this exposed midpoint, that Ukraine decided to strike. The operation began with Ukraine's Buyan-M land-based signals intelligence system, stationed near the front. These mobile listening units had spent months intercepting encrypted Russian military communications. Days before the attack, analysts detected faint transmissions on a high-level frequency reserved for the Black Sea Fleet, but coming from Russia's northwest. That anomaly raised immediate suspicion. What would a Black Sea Fleet command channel be doing near the Finnish border? Ukraine's satellite analysis unit was activated. Using commercial satellite imagery, they began scanning ship movements along the White Sea Baltic Canal. Normally, this route was used by smaller naval vessels and submarines of the Northern Fleet, avoiding NATO-monitored waters in the North Atlantic. It was essentially a hidden passage, a ghost corridor for transferring military assets undetected by Western radar and sonar. But this time, it had been compromised. Among the dozens of vessels identified, one matched the dimensions and silhouette of a Buyan-M class corvette, anchored away from civilian routes in the middle of Lake Onega. The coordinates were confirmed. Final verification came from within Russia itself. A covert cell linked to Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence, or GUR, confirmed the vessel's identity. The Grad recently transferred from the Black Sea Fleet to avoid Ukrainian strikes. For Kyiv, it was a perfect convergence of intelligence and opportunity. A high-value target, stationary, located deep inside Russian territory, unguarded and complacent. But there was a problem. A conventional air or missile strike was impossible. The area was under the protective dome of S-400 long-range air defenses guarding St. Petersburg, reinforced by Panzer S-1 systems along the canal. Ukraine needed something smaller, stealthier, and smarter. The solution? The Liuti long-range strike drone. With an operational range of about 750 miles, 1,200 kilometers, the Liuti could deliver a 165-pound, 75-kilogram high-explosive warhead. Its effectiveness came from its 3-tier guidance system. First, an inertial navigation system, INS, using gyroscopes and preloaded terrain maps, allowed it to navigate without GPS. Second, a multiband GNSS receiver provided satellite navigation even under Russian jamming. And third, an electro-optical/infrared seeker head. EO/IR enabled visual and thermal lock-on during the final seconds before impact, but to reach its target, it needed a diversion. 2 Banshee LR electronic warfare drones were assigned to escort the Liuti. These decoy aircraft shared the same airframe and range, but were equipped with electronic warfare pods instead of explosives. Their role: fly ahead of and beside the Liuti, detect radar emissions, and jam them, creating narrow, blind corridors through which the main drone could slip undetected. In essence, the Banshees would act as bait, drawing Russian air defenses away from the true threat. The mission launched from a classified Ukrainian base in the north. The Liuti and 2 Banshees flew low and steady for hours across Russia's sparsely populated northern regions, using pre-identified radar gaps. Roughly 3 hours into the mission, a Buyan-M radar in Tver Oblast picked up a weak contact. But 1 Banshee instantly identified the radar's operating frequency and launched focused jamming, turning the radar operator's screen into static. The contact vanished. As they neared Lake Onega, about 62 miles from the target, a Panzer S-1 battery detected 2 inbound drones flying low. The commander locked onto the decoys, the 2 Banshees. What he didn't see was the Liuti, flying several miles behind, hugging terrain at an even lower altitude, completely invisible to radar. At 4:30 a.m., the Liuti crossed over the lake. Its EO/IR seeker is activated, scanning for heat and shape profiles stored in its onboard memory. Within seconds, it located a thermal signature that matched. The Grad, stationary, engines off but still emitting residual heat from onboard systems. The seeker confirmed the target match. The Liuti entered a steep terminal dive. The sound of its piston engine was faint, but by the time anyone on the ship noticed, it was too late. The 165-pound warhead penetrated the ship's thin upper armor and detonated inside the engine compartment, igniting fuel and munition. A chain of secondary explosions tore through the corvette. Flames engulfed the vessel. Within minutes, the Grad, a $184 million warship, was burning uncontrollably in waters the Russian Navy had long considered untouchable. This was more than a tactical strike. It was a strategic message. For over 2 centuries, Russia's military doctrine had been built on the concept of strategic depth, the idea that its vast territory offered protection from invasion. From Napoleon's march on Moscow to Hitler's Operation Barbarossa, Russia's defense strategy relied on geography, space, and distance as armor. But in the age of precision weapons and AI-assisted targeting, that armor had become irrelevant. A single drone launched from Ukraine had struck the Russian Navy inside its own inland waters, just 250 miles from St. Petersburg, proof that there was no longer any safe zone. To understand the magnitude of what Ukraine accomplished, it's essential to grasp the canal's importance. The White Sea Baltic Canal, a 141-mile network built during the Stalin era by forced labor from Gulag camps, links the Arctic Ocean to the Baltic through Lake Onega and St. Petersburg. Tens of thousands died constructing it in brutal conditions. Today, it serves a dual purpose: commercial cargo transport and covert military transit. According to Western intelligence assessments, Russian submarines and small naval vessels, those less than 165 feet wide, regularly use this inland waterway to move between the Northern Fleet's bases and the Baltic, avoiding NATO surveillance across the North Sea. Lake Onega, the canal's widest and slowest section, is the choke point. Ukraine's strike hit that exact vulnerability, a precise cut into the logistical bloodstream of Russia's Northern Naval Command. The destruction of the Grad shattered more than just steel. It shattered an illusion. For the Kremlin, it meant that no part of Russia, no canal, no lake, no inland harbor, was beyond reach. The belief that geography could substitute for defense had been proven false, and the psychological impact was immediate. Until now, Russia's upper class and political elite, especially those in St. Petersburg, had lived as if the war was distant. Their summer villas, yachts, and city life continued undisturbed. The front lines were something to watch on television. The strike on Lake Onega changed that overnight, because this wasn't just another Ukrainian drone hitting an oil depot or an airfield. It was an explosion heard from the backyard of Russia's second capital, less than half a day's drive from the Kremlin's own leadership circle. For the first time, Russia's wealthy elite understood that the war had reached them. That psychological shift was precisely the intent. The attack targeted not only a warship, but the illusion of safety within the Russian establishment. Panic spread through encrypted communication channels, private chat groups, and internal military circles. If we're not safe here, some whispered, we're not safe anywhere. And that fear began to influence decision-making at the highest levels. Now the Kremlin faces a strategic dilemma with no good answer. Should it concentrate its remaining 400 systems and elite air defense units on protecting the front lines, where hundreds of soldiers die daily, or redeploy them to guard its interior regions, critical waterways, industrial centers, and military bases stretching thousands of miles across Russia? Both options come at a catastrophic cost. Pulling defenses from the front risks collapse there. Moving them inward leaves the borders and logistics routes open to Ukrainian counterattacks. It's a slow but inevitable suffocation, Russia's own geography turning into a liability. With one strike, Ukraine exposed the paradox of modern war. Vast territory offers no safety when precision weapons can travel hundreds of miles unseen. Lake Onega became proof that strategic depth is no longer defense, it's exposure. The Grad's destruction was a signal. There are no longer front lines in this war. The battlefield now stretches invisibly from Ukrainian trenches to the northernmost edges of Russia itself. And for the first time since the invasion began, Russia's leadership must confront a question it long believed impossible: how do you defend a nation that's too large to protect?